driven by hunger, the tribe known as the Winils departed their Scandinavian homeland of Scania in search of more promising lands. Led by Ivor and Agio, this wandering people arrived in the fertile region of Skoringa, where they established settlements and built new lives. Yet the Vandals who already occupied the land would only surrender it in exchange for tribute. Though few in number, the Winils were courageous, and so refused to submit and readied themselves for battle. On the eve of the conflict, both tribes prayed to the god Woden, who promised victory to whichever group he first beheld at dawn. Gambara, mother of the Winil leaders, advised her people to instead direct their prayers to Freya, Woden's wife. Freya instructed the women to arrange their hair before their faces like beards and position themselves in the east. At dawn, Freya turned Woden's bed toward the eastern window. Upon waking, the god exclaimed, "Who are these long beards?" Freya replied, "You have given them a name, now grant them victory." So goes one version of the origin of the Lombards, one of the most significant Germanic tribes of early medieval history. A people who fundamentally reshaped the history of medieval Italy after the fall of Rome, and for whom the modern Italian region of Lombardy is named. In this video, we explore the history of the Lombards and their kingdom, which dominated large parts of Italy from the late 6th to the late 8th century. We will examine their supposed origins, their conquest of the heart of the Latin world, and their eventual decline under Frankish pressure. The traditional story of the Lombards describes a people native to Scandinavia who migrated southwards and conquered Italy. However, modern scholarship rejects the idea of a unified migration from the Nordic regions. Rather, traditional origin stories that describe the Lombard southwards migration, such as the one we retold in our introduction, were later constructs designed to provide a shared identity. These narratives, often humorous, helped explain and reinforce the identity of the Lombard people as it evolved over time. Like many so-called barbarian groups migrating about Europe after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Lombards were not a fixed ethnic group, but a fluid political and military coalition, absorbing new peoples over time. But archaeogenetic evidence suggests that groups in Pannonia with northern and central European ancestry later appeared in northern Italy, indicating a relatively rapid movement into the peninsula as a consolidated group. The first mentions of the Lombards in the historical record come from Roman authors of the Augustan period, who mention a small tribe called the Lombards settled at the southern Elbe. By the time of the Marcomannic Wars, nearly 2 centuries later, the Lombards reappeared in Roman records as enemies of the empire, before disappearing into obscurity once more. By the late 5th century, the Lombards reappeared in the sources in the region of Noricum, where they settled with the tacit approval of Emperor Zeno. By the beginning of the 6th century, the Lombards also left this area and moved to Pannonia. Here they settled once more and found themselves in a tributary relationship with another itinerant Germanic tribe, the Heruli. Under their king Toto, the Lombards defeated the Heruli as early as 508 and shattered their kingdom. Thereafter, Toto was overthrown by his nephew Wacho, who led the Lombards further into Pannonia with the consent of Eastern Roman emperors Justin I and Justinian I. With Constantinople's approval, the Lombards were granted fortresses in Pannonia and the Noric polis. Through a string of shrewd political marriages, Wacho allied himself with other powerful Germanic tribes such as the Thuringians, Gepids, Heruls, and Franks, whilst at the same time making use of the Roman military infrastructure he had been given access to. With their powerful position within the late antique world secured, the Lombards lived in Pannonia and became one of the many Romanized Germanic cultures that developed on the borders of the crumbling empire. In 548, the first foedus, or military treaty, was signed between the Lombards and the Eastern Roman Empire during the reign of Byzantine Emperor Justinian I and the Lombard King Alboin. During the reign of Alboin, the Lombards waged several wars against the Gepids on behalf of their Eastern Roman overlords, as well as provided troops for the Emperor Justinian during his wars against Sassanid Persia and his ambitious reconquest of Italy from its Ostrogothic occupiers. Under the command of the Eastern Roman general Narses, the Lombards were feared for their brutality and were likely instrumental in the Eastern Roman reconquest of their empire's ancestral Italian homeland. Through their service, numerous Lombards became officers in the Roman army, and the Lombards developed a familiarity with Roman culture. Together with the Avars, the Lombards finally crushed the Gepid Empire between 565 and 567. Thereafter, the reigning Lombard King Alboin seized the finest prize from the spoils of war and married Rosamund, the daughter of the last Gepid king, Cunimund. In a legendary exaggeration, Paulus Diaconus reports that Alboin forced his bride to drink from her father's skull, which had been fashioned into a drinking bowl. Following this victory, Alboin became the ruler of most of the warrior groups living in the Middle Danube region. Infused with newfound power, he gathered his Lombards and forged an alliance of Suebi, Sarmatians, Bulgarians, Romans, and a particularly large group of Saxons under his control, with whom he turned upon his people's former Eastern Roman overlords and set out to invade the only recently reconquered Eastern Roman province of Italy. The group of people that Alboin led into Italy in 568 CE is thought to have numbered around 100 Zalozan, all of whom were looking to permanently settle in the region. The reasons for this exodus are unclear and range from pressure from the expanding Avars to the rumor that the Lombards had been treacherously invited by the general Narses, to the fact that the new emperor, Justin II, had ceased paying tribute to the peoples on the empire's borders and thus broke the status quo in the region. Initially, the arrival of the Lombards met with little resistance. The Byzantine reconquest and a devastating outbreak of the Black Death had left Italy a devastated place. Alboin's army proceeded in a brutal but calculated manner, forcing the cities in Western Italy to surrender as quickly as possible. Once a Roman city had been conquered, Alboin placed it under the command of a dux, who led his own contingent of troops. On September 3, 569, the Lombards captured Milan, with the Po Valley and Tuscany soon following suit. 3 years later, Pavia fell and was transformed into the capital of the new Lombard kingdom. However, Alboin's coalition of the Lombards and the other tribes fell apart when he had himself proclaimed Lord of Italy in Milan. The forces united under him became independent and scattered in all directions. Some of them pillaged into the Frankish realm, whilst others turned south and marched through central Italy. From these groups emerged the duchies of Spoleto and Benevento, both of which often acted autonomously from the developing Lombard kingdom in the north up into the 8th century. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire retained key coastal regions, including Ravenna, Rome, and parts of southern Italy. Alboin was not to enjoy the fruits of his conquest for long, for in 572 he was murdered in Verona. According to legend, it was his captive war bride, Rosamund, who instigated a conspiracy against him and persuaded 2 of his bodyguards to murder the king during his midday nap as revenge for her father. Rosamund succeeded her husband as ruler of Lombard Italy, but she did not last long either, and was forced to flee to Ravenna with the royal treasure and one of the murderers, with whom she took her life in a suicide pact. Following the brief reign of a Lombard king named Clef, who was likewise murdered, the Lombards remained without a ruler for 10 years. It was only the simultaneous threat posed by an alliance between Constantinople and the Franks that prompted the Lombards to elect a new king, Rothari, in 584. Rothari adopted the imperial Roman title of Flavius to strengthen royal authority over his people and his conquered Roman subjects. Rothari reigned until 590 CE, during which time he successfully repelled attacks by the Franks and forged an alliance with the Bavarians through his marriage to Theodolinde. Rothari's queen, Theodolinde, was one of the most influential female figures in Lombard history, for after her husband's death, she was granted the right to choose the next king of the Lombards by marrying a fitting candidate. The new husband she chose was Agilulf, Duke of Turin. But the queen did more than just select a new king. Under Theodolinde's influence, the Catholic faith was promoted among the Lombards, and churches and monasteries were built, spreading the Catholic faith among the Lombards, who had previously been predominantly Arian Christians. Through her correspondence with Pope Gregory the Great, a peace treaty was successfully negotiated with Byzantium. But despite the increasingly consolidated power of the Lombard monarchy, the following decades and centuries were repeatedly marked by internal power struggles, usurpations, and recurring conflicts with the Byzantines. Let us now take a look into the structure of the Lombard realm and society that developed following their arrival in Italy. After settling in their new Latin homeland, the Lombards increasingly adapted to their new Roman, Christian environment. This is hardly surprising, as the Lombards now lived in the heart of the fallen Western Roman Empire, where they could draw upon numerous existing systems and infrastructures of the late empire that they used to some extent, especially to govern the majority of their Roman subjects. At the head of the Lombard kingdom stood the king. His power was based on the crown estates, which had emerged from former domains of the Roman Empire, which he had confiscated into his possession. These estates were administered by the Gastards, officers from Lombards of higher birth. However, these officials did not merely manage the king's estates, they also held military and judicial functions as judges and collected fines due to the king. They also administered towns and villages as well as state-like functions that were directly under the king's control, thereby acting as a counterbalance to the power of the dukes. The cities of northern Italy remained the centers of political power, within a corresponding surrounding territory, along the established Roman system. At the head of each city, and thus region, stood a dux or duke. Within their territories, they collected taxes, served as supreme judges, and maintained their own residence in their city. Therefore, a dux's rule could at times be quite autonomous from the king's central authority. The Lombards had left Pannonia as forae, or traveling communities. In such a community, warriors were grouped together with their families and associated individuals. But the people of Afara were not only bound together as a kin structure, but also as a military unit. It was along these groups that the settlement of Italy took place, and names such as Fara di Sanzo or Fara Novarese still bear witness to their Lombard origins. Administratively assigned to a city, but often based in the countryside, were the Aramani or Exercitales. Both terms reflect the main role of these men. They were soldiers. Legally, they were freemen with their own landholdings and inheritance rights. Some of them were also allocated state land by the king or a dux who wanted to increase his following. The Aramani were permitted to bequeath these state-owned lands to their sons, provided their sons also took up the father's military service. In addition to military service, the Aramani were also obliged to help build infrastructure and had to attend assemblies where laws were voted on and justice was administered. Whilst this social rank was initially withheld from others, soon Romans were admitted, and inheritance laws also became more lenient over time. All in all, there would have been immense differences in terms of wealth and the backgrounds of individual members of this group. The Aldaeans were the peasants that constituted the majority of the kingdom's inhabitants. They tilled the land and were bound to their plots, with rights equivalent to serfs. They comprised not only the lower-ranking Lombards, but also the many Romans who remained in Italy after the conquest. Their most distinctive feature was that every Aldean had to have a patron. They were understood and treated specifically in terms of this hierarchical relationship, as the Aldeans were subject to their patron's munt, his guardianship. The Roman population under Lombard rule was divided into tributary, or taxpayers, and allocated to the free Lombards as their hostages, their guests, to whom they had to pay a third of their income. As non-Lombards, the Romans were subject to Roman law, which remained in use in Italy even after the fall of the Roman Empire. Further insights into Lombard society are granted by King Rothari's Edict. This law code was passed during a military assembly on 23rd of November 643 through the ritual of the Garithings, or spear thing. Numerous aspects of this law concern those sections of society obliged to perform military service. The historian Stefan Esters assumes that this judicial focus was influenced by Roman military law, which was the Lombards' first contact with Roman statehood and law. Under this law, most high crimes, such as treason against the king or the dukes, were punishable by death. A man accused of a capital offense could clear himself of the charge by taking an oath, whereupon the accuser could in turn challenge him to a duel. Minor offenses ranging from theft and poaching to arson and manslaughter, or refusal to perform military service, were punished by fines. The severity of the penalty was not determined solely by the nature of the offense. Other factors, such as the social status and the social and political standing and function of both the perpetrator and the victim, also played a role in determining the punishment. In some instances, detailed penalties are specified for severed body parts. Such fines were intended to limit blood feuds as a means of legal self-help. Many of the fines were set so high that they were scarcely affordable by an individual. Thus, the penalties were intended to have a preventive effect on this society. All in all, Lombard society appears to have been a martial warrior society shaped by notions of honor. The role of Lombard women was also regulated by law. In this respect, Lombard law afforded women less freedom than comparable laws of the Franks or Alemanni. No woman was permitted to remain without the authority of a man. For any legal proceedings, they required the consent of the man under whose munt, or guardianship, the women stood. Upon marriage, a woman's guardianship was acquired through gifts from her bridegroom to her family. It was ultimately the existence as a free warrior and the associated legal status that established itself as an essential component of what it meant to be a Lombard. Through this Lombard law, the circle of people eligible to be a Lombard was carefully expanded, as more people could attain this status through birth, marriage, manumission, and wealth. Following this digression on the internal structures of the Lombard kingdom, we shall now turn our attention to the end of this realm in the 8th century. By this late period, the Lombards' own sources dry up and are replaced by external sources offering a mostly negative account. Under Kings Luitprand and Aistulf, the Lombards were able to bring the southern duchies of Spoleto and Benevento under nominal sovereignty. Through an aggressive policy of expansion, in 751, Aistulf defeated the Eastern Roman Exarchate of Ravenna in a major military campaign, and thus brought the remaining Byzantine possessions in northern and central Italy under his control. Aistulf now turned his attention to Rome, threatening to encircle the Eternal City. In Rome, the Pope was now without his city's traditional protector from the east, and so turned his attention northwards. Beyond the Alps, the Franks, under the new Carolingian dynasty, had secured a position of hegemony in Western and Central Europe. By promising to strengthen this new dynasty under Pippin III through anointing oils and titles, the Pope secured the Franks as his new protectors, while Pippin promised the transfer of territories that had previously been part of the Exarchate and now under Lombard control. In 754, Aistulf ordered a general mobilization to repel a Frankish intervention, to no avail. The Frankish army invaded Italy the following year and defeated the Lombard army in a fierce battle. The Lombards retreated in disarray to Pavia, which was besieged. Northern Italy was plundered, and peace was reached just 2 months after the fighting began. When Aistulf broke the treaty in 756 and once again threatened Rome, Pippin returned, defeated the Lombards again, and handed over further cities to the Pope, but also renewed the treaties with the Lombards. Pippin, who was interested not in conquest, but merely in fulfilling his promise to the Pope, withdrew with the hostages he had taken. The Pope had now become lord not only of Rome, but also of Ravenna and the Pentapolis. Thus, the Papal States were born, thereby forming a counterweight to the Lombards. King Aistulf died shortly afterwards in a hunting accident, and Desiderius, a Tuscan duke, succeeded him as king, tolerated by the Franks and the Pope. He was to rule over the Lombard kingdom for another generation before Charlemagne seized the Iron Crown of the Lombards in 774. But that is a story for another day. In conclusion, it can be said that the history of the Lombards provides a striking example of the dynamics of early medieval societies. Within a few centuries, a loosely organized military confederation developed into a complexly organized kingdom that shaped large parts of Italy. In doing so, the Lombards combined their own traditions with Roman structures and gradually adapted to their new environment. Their history demonstrates how closely political power, military strength, and cultural integration were intertwined. However, the eventual downfall of the kingdom in the wake of Frankish expansion also highlights the limits of this development. Overall, the Lombards offer a fascinating insight into the processes of transformation between antiquity and the Middle Ages and demonstrate how identity, rule, and society were renegotiated during a period of profound upheaval. More videos on this era of history are on the way, so make sure you subscribe and press the bell button to see them. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.